One of the things that I have been doing is reading through the Hebrew Bible and the Greek New Testament, looking at classic text and looking at each word grammatically, doing more of an inductive grammatical analysis of every word. Just to introduce myself, as I'm striking out on this, I guess you would say, different adventure for me. I'm a retired seminary professor. I was chair of Old Testament. My main focus over the years has been in biblical studies. I have a doctorate of theology from Dallas Seminary. And during my seminary days and college days, I focused in Greek New Testament and also biblical studies. Then I have a Master of Arts degree from Dropsy, the Dropsy College, which formerly was a Jewish school that focused in post-graduate master's and PhD work in Hebrew and ancient Near Eastern languages. And then I finally, I did finish my PhD then in Hebrew and ancient Near Eastern languages from New York University. So I enjoy languages, and I'm at this point in life, and mainly what I'm putting out are a lot of works in Greek and Hebrew biblical languages, the grammar with commentary. Also, I put out some Akkadian grammar in the area of Hammurabi's epilogue, looking at each word grammatically in Akkadian. I thought I would do something different today, and that is put out the first, the introduction to Homer's Iliad. Now, I have to admit, I am not a classically trained scholar. My life has been spent in biblical studies and primarily the languages of Scripture and ancient Near Eastern languages. But today I thought, well, I would just put it out there and just see if it could be a help to anyone. If anyone wants to correct me on some of my grammar, feel free to do it. I'm challenged just in my own mind to keep reading new material. And one of the things that has excited me a long time ago about classical studies was Henry David Thoreau's writing, and he lived from 1817 to 1862, and especially his work on Walden. And in it, he had a wonderful section, I believe, on reading. And he makes this statement, and I'm reading from his work on Walden: the student may read Homer or Aeschylus in the Greek without danger of dissipation or luxuriousness, for it implies that he in some measure emulate their heroes and consecrate morning hours to their pages. I don't know about the morning hours, but then he goes on and he says, we must laboriously seek the meaning of each word and line, conjecturing a larger sense than common use permits of what wisdom and valor and generosity we have. And so he talks about the importance of the original classical languages. And he was specifically speaking to a large degree of Homer and Virgil. There is a statement he makes: to read well, that is to read true books, is a true spirit, and a true spirit is a noble exercise, and one that will task the reader more than any exercise which the customs of the day may esteem. He talks about how we need to go through and look at each line and each word to determine the meaning. And so he says, the adventurous student will always study classics. Well, I hope I'm still adventurous in studying the classics. He goes on to say, and I like this statement: those who have not learn to read the ancient classics in the language in which they were written must have a very imperfect knowledge of the history of the human race, for it is remarkable that no transcript of them no transcript of them, really, he's going to say, has ever been made in any modern tongue, unless our civilization itself may be regarded as such a transcript. Homer has never yet been printed in English, nor Aeschylus, nor Virgil. And he goes on to say, comparing these works as beautiful almost as the morning itself. And for later writers, say what we will of their genius, have rarely, if ever, equaled the elaborate beauty and finish in the lifelong and heroic literary labors of the ancients. So what I would like to do is to follow Thoreau's advice and just work through the introduction to the Homer's Iliad from the Greek, looking at each word in my understanding of it. And I would welcome anyone that would like to join to have, I think you can find online, certainly the first 5 lines or 6 lines of Homer in Greek, and I believe that is available online. I would like to say that some of the books that has helped me a lot in preparing these few lines would be Homeric Greek, written by Farr and Clyde Farr, and then revised by John Wright. And it's a real wonderful book. It's called Homeric Greek. I would also say another book that could be recommended would be Selections from Homer's Iliad by Benner. And this takes different selections, and it has a dictionary in the back, and it was published or copyrighted in 1903. So the book may be out of print, I don't know. But I had it in my library, and I wanted to introduce those tools. Also, a dictionary is the Greek-English lexicon, Liddell and Scott. And there's also a Homeric dictionary if one is interested as well. But Liddell and Scott has always been the standard for reading Greek in classical Greek. I have both the larger one and the abridgment, and I'm using the abridged form of Liddell and Scott, and it was published at Oxford at the Clarendon Press. So those are some tools that could be helpful. So what I'd like to do is to begin reading the first few lines of Homer and trying to look at each word grammatically, at least as I'm able to understand it. Let me just make one statement. We will not be reading it in hexameter, which is the way that it was written in a poetic way. And you can find that, I believe, on YouTube and other sites, where each foot will have either a long and 2 short vowels or 2 long vowels, and the whole poem was written that way, line by line. And I won't be reading in that manner. Matter of fact, I am not that fluent in reading hexameter poetry, but just to introduce it, in line 1, you have main and which would be a long vowel in the eta and the iota short, alpha short, and then the, you would have an a, an epsilon iota, a diphthong, followed by epsilon and epsilon, short vowels, and then long, pe, what is called a sponde, I believe, where you have 2 long vowels, and then le, and here you have a long eta, and then a short iota, and alpha, and then deo. Here's another diphthong, but read as one long vowel, or one long sound, deo, and then aki. Here you have alpha, which is short, and iota, which is short, and then ending with le, us, two long vowels. The final vowel has to be long, in my understanding, even though it's an omicron, it's read as a long vowel. And so that is the way one would go through and mark each line if one was seeking to read by hexameter. You can find that, though, I think there are places on YouTube where it is read in that kind of style in a wonderful way, much better than I could even attempt to do it. But meinin de ad e dethe a pe le a del a ke le us, something like that. But at any rate, I won't be doing that. I'll be reading it and just reading the Greek in the way that I would read, let's say, Koine Greek or New Testament Greek, and then looking at the grammar. So we begin in line 1. It reads, Menin aede thea peleadeo akeleos. Notice the wrath. Wrath here, the word wrath or anger is where we is the first word that we begin with, and the goddess is being asked to inspire me, and so the wrath, inspire me, and notice just in trying to parse it or decline it, Menon is an accusative singular with menis. It's a feminine noun, che, and it means wrath. And aeda is from edo, a present, notice, imperative, active imperative, second person singular. So what the text is saying here is asking the goddess, the muse, for inspiration to write what Homer is wanting to write. So we could say, and then we go to the next word, thea, meaning it's a vocative, meaning goddess. Goddess being the muse of song. So inspire me, we could say, O goddess, to sing about the wrath, the menon. And then as we move on, it says, Peleadeo, son of Peleus, Archeleos, of Archelaus. And so it's talking about the wrath of Archelaus, who is the son of Peleus. By the way, Peleus is the husband of Thetis, in my understanding, who is the father of Achilles. And notice Archelaos is the genitive here from Achilleus. So we could render it, sing, O goddess, concerning the anger. But then we have to go to the second line to complete the thought, and that is ulamene, that is, sing, O goddess, of son of Peleades, that is, of Achilles, the destroying wrath. And notice ulamene is emphatic, just like menin is emphatic, putting emphasis upon the wrath and the destroying wrath. of the god Zeus, because of Achilles, I should say, of what has gone on. And notice ulamenein is emphatic then at the head of the clause, and it, in a sense, is an apposition to meinen, and it is, as we look at it, a second aorist participle middle accusative feminine singular from alumi, meaning that destructive wrath. So sing, O goddess, of that destructive, that pernicious wrath or anger of Achilles. Notice, basically, if you're thinking about the luo and you're looking at, say, an aorist middle form, participial form, lusamenas, in other words, lusamenas would be your aorist middle. And here we have a verb alumi, and alumene is your second aorist, and it's a participle middle that we're looking at here. So sing, O muse, O goddess, the destroying anger of Achilles. Then we could translate it son of Peleus. And then as we move on through this second line, notice it then reads, He muri akaios alge ethekin, which placed myriads of woes to the Achaeans. And so if we look at the grammar here, notice he is your relative pronoun, and this is followed then by muria or muri with algeia, which would be innumerable woes. Notice here, both are in the accusative, going with the verb place, which placed many woes, ethekin. So which placed innumerable woes, we could say. Muria algeia. Muria is an adjective, and algeia is a noun. And so we would render it innumerable woes. And notice etheke is an aorist indicative active, third masculine or third person singular from tithemi. And so you think of tithemi, theso, etheka. And so this is your aorist indicative active, third person singular. So sing, O goddess, of the destroying anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, which placed or caused innumerable woes to the Achaeans. And notice, as we're looking at this line, that we have akaios, which is in your dative plural case. So which numerous woes he placed to the Achaeans. And then we come to the next line, palas diphthemus psuchas aidi praeapsin, and that is which hurled many heroes or many warriors, hurled many souls, we could say warrior souls, to Hades. And notice as we look at this line, we have iphthemas, meaning mighty or strong. So which hurled strong, many strong souls. And notice psuchas is your accusative, meaning souls, as well as the adjective strong, iphthemus, and many as well. And then praeapsin is from the form praeapto, meaning to hurl or send forth. And notice in the aorist here, this is an aorist indicative active, third person singular from praeapto. When you add your sigma, praeaps, with your tav there, with your tau there, you end up with a psi, and that is indicative of your aorist indicative active, third person singular. So which sent forth or hurled many souls, many mighty souls to Hades. And by the way, Hades was the god of the underworld, of the lower world. And when you think about the Greek idea of the lower world, it was going down underneath to, we could say, almost like a flu-like existence in the underworld. And it was not a place where anyone wanted to go. And it's sort of like often what we find like in ancient Babylonian literature, going down into the underworld. I've been working on a text where Ishtar goes down to her sister, Ereshkigal, in the underworld. And she has to come through the gates of the underworld, and then she'll be coming back up. What's striking to me, and even Sheol in the Hebrew Bible often had that thought, but what is striking to me as a Christian minister is that in the New Testament, we are told that the soul, for example, of a believer in Jesus at the end of life goes to the presence of Christ, which is in paradise. I'm reminded of Jesus, for example, when he was speaking to the thief on the cross, said, "Today you shall be with me in paradise." Paradise was a word that had to do with garden, and it looked at God's presence in rabbinic literature. So what a difference I feel as I read the New Testament and how Jesus conquers death and ascended to the Father. And so now souls that die who know Christ go into his presence. Paul could say to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. So I want to sometimes do parallel, just like I do when I do Akkadian or a Hebrew, to New Testament theology, since I am a Christian minister. But at any rate, going on, and so the text says he sent many souls to Hades of heroes, Heroon. So he sent numerous souls. And by the way, mighty, strong is the way I think we should translate Ephemus. Mighty, strong souls. Now we have Heroon. Heroon, notice, is your genitive plural from Heros, which means heroes. Warriors are heroes. That is, he sent many to Hades, the anger of Achilles, causing that to happen, and of souls or of heroes. And then it goes on to say, autus de Heloria tuke kunasim. That is, he was placing them, or was, can I say, making them as a result of what happened in this anger that has been caused. He is making these souls to be a praise for the dogs. And notice Elodrion, or spoils, we should translate it, is from elodrion, and elodria is the neuter plural. So he's making them to be spoils for the dogs. And notice the word making, tu ke, is your imperfect indicative active third person singular from tuko, meaning to make. And so he was making them is the way we could translate it. Spoils, cheloria, or prey. I guess we could say spoils would be a good way to translate it. It's a plural here. Spoils for the dogs. Notice kunasin is the dative plural from kuon, and kuon means dog, and kunas would be the genitive. And then, so what we have here is your dative plural in kunasin. And not only spoils for the dogs, but also oinoisi te daita, feast for the birds. Notice the word oinoisin is the meaning of this word means birds, and it's another dative, and it's from oionos, so feast for the birds. And we have dice, meaning a banquet or feast. Dice, daitas, che is the noun. So making them to be feasts for the dogs. We have the accusative followed by the dative in onoisin. So both and, making them to be, can we say, spoils for the dogs and feast for the birds. It's interesting. One of the worst things was for one to die and not be buried. That was the worst thing that could happen. And you find that same imagery in Yeshayahu, the book of Isaiah, chapter 13 and 14 of the king of Syria. Isaiah is speaking of him not having a burial and being left out in the fields for the birds and for the dogs. It's also interesting when you think about the book of Yehezkel, the book of Ezekiel. You have the same kind of teaching in Gog and Magog in 38 and 39 of the birds and feasting upon carcasses. And I think that in New Testament theology becomes a symbol of just the final judgment in a symbolic way. But at any rate, going back to Homer, so he was placing them to be a spoil for the dogs and feasts or banquets for the birds. And Zeus, we're told, Deus, de tele et boule. Zeus was perfecting or complete, or I should render it, the will of Zeus was being perfected or being fulfilled. Notice etele eta is your imperfect passive, indicative passive, third person singular from teleo, meaning to be fulfilled. And boule is the noun meaning will. So the will of Zeus was being fulfilled. And so as we read this text in, notice if giving it a translation, sing, O goddess, of the destroying anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, which placed innumerable woes to the Achaeans, and prematurely sent or hurled many brave souls of heroes to Hades, and was making them a praise for the dogs and to all birds of prey. We could say feast to all the birds, and the will of Zeus was being fulfilled. And the next two lines I'll just read real quickly. Out of which time indeed, first, both the son of Atreus, the king of men, Anax Andron, and divine Achilles, Dios Achilles, Erisanted, having contended. Here we have an aorist participial form, having contended, and then stood apart or separated, or we could say separated, having contended, diastatin. And these lines introduce the introduction to Homer's Iliad. And I thought it was interesting. There was a nice, beautiful summary that Farr makes of these verses. He says, these verses introduce the Iliad. The subject is announced in the very first word, menace, anger. It is the wrath of Achilles and the disastrous consequences to the Greeks. So it is Achilles' wrath that caused this to happen. But all, he writes, in accordance with the will of Zeus, which forms the principal theme of the poem. So this text is like a prologue. It's an introduction, and it forms the principal theme of Homer, in which the wrath of Achilles has disastrous consequences to the Greeks, but it's all in accordance with the will of Zeus, which, and we put all this together, form the principal theme of the poem. So I'm having fun with this. I'm trying to learn a little bit of classical Greek, because most of my life has been spent in biblical and also in biblical Hebrew. By the way, if anyone would have any interest to look at some of the grammars that we've done in that, I would invite you to go to my website, not my website, well, that too, but YouTube, Dr. Gary Stads, and you'll see the works that we've done in Hebrew biblical grammar, inductive study, as well as in the Greek New Testament, and even in Akkadian, if anyone would have any interest in doing that. So thank you for your time. I hope what we've done has been helpful.